Hello, you're listening to Count Richard von Coudenhove Kalergi. Today is Monday, the 27th of January, and I know I'm putting two videos together, 2 days in a row, but I hope you bear with me, and I'll make some explanation as to why this actually got my curiosity. And this is our friend, the P3 Orion, which is actually, it's NOAA, which is the organization, not NASA, which is my mistake, but it's still a surveying aircraft. And I say based on the Lockheed Electra aircraft. But what caught my attention really was there were two flights yesterday that appeared on flight radar, and I suppose I might as well give a little flight of that. So basically, it heads off at, this is 8:34 in the morning, and flies out from Shannon. Flies out. Basically, it's as you say, the time it took off there, and then it seems to just disappear off flight radar. So that's one aspect. So we'll get rid of that one, and we'll go back into this one, which was yesterday. And this is where it comes back and arrives back in Shannon. But you can see it seems to be off radar for close to 5 hours. So I suppose that's what got my attention really. And the same thing happened today. It went out on the 27th of January, as in earlier on today. And what have we got here? We have it flying out at 9:15 in the morning, roughly. And it does a longer route this time. And so 9:15. So we're looking at a flying time here now, probably a little over an hour. And it'd be interesting to see now what altitude these flights were taken. So then a little over an hour later, he disappears yet again off flight radar, and then reappears again and heads back. So that's what got me curious as to what was he doing off radar. And I have to say, thank you very much for some of the comments that were in after the last video, including John, who had the pleasure of seeing the aircraft flying over Tralee. Thanks for your comment, John. Appreciate that. And also to Mark, who put in a message about the destruction and devastation that his calls to his home and to some barns and outbuildings which have animals. And I'm very sorry to hear about these circumstances. And I really do hope that you get your electricity restored as soon as possible, and that you get the necessary assistance that you need. Now, interestingly, just before I started this video, I was watching this Air Force Boeing Clipper, which I suppose is based on the Boeing 737 model, flying in from Krakow, landing in Shannon, and it doesn't appear to be among the listings of aircraft landing in Shannon. And that flew in from Camp Springs to Krakow, which is, I think it's split between Camp Springs and Andrews Air Force Base on one side. Now, I suppose the other two reasons for my video is that I came across a story earlier on today, which is something that I'd never heard of. And it was a tragedy which happened on the 27th of January 1961, which was a week after the inauguration of JFK as president, that the Havilland Dove crashed, and with a crew of 5, 4 people were killed. And the interesting aspect of this is that this Captain Jim Liddy was the only member of the crew who actually survived. Now, this is the type of aircraft that they were flying, which was the Havilland Dove, a twin-engined, pistoned engine aircraft, which would have been used, I suppose, in some regional airliners would have used them, and a very popular and nice aircraft it was too. But what struck me about this was that the the man who actually survived this aircraft would have flown quite a few other very interesting aircraft while he was in the Irish Air Corps. One of the planes he would have flown was the two-seat Supermarine Spitfire, which was the Mark 9 model, which had the forward cockpit move slightly forward, and it was a training aircraft. And this particular photograph was taken in 1968 before it was actually sold off. And the other airplane he would have flown as well would have been the de Havilland Vampire, which was one of my favourites, and those old enough to remember would have remembered its very distinctive howl as it dived sometimes at different air shows, and the Easter Sunday parades. They used to fly them down O'Connell Street. I think they had 5 of them at one stage, retired in 1975. And there's an example of it there in the National Museum of Ireland, carefully bolted onto the ceiling. Now, I'd just like to put a little bit of a connection here with all of these. There was 4 major Hollywood movies made in Ireland between the late 60s and early 1970s. The Blue Max was one of them, with George Peppard, Ursula Andress and James Mason. And all the pilots were the Air Corps pilots were used in the making of the film, which, in my opinion, have some of the best aircraft flying sequences ever put in film, before Top Gun, of course. And they had replica aircraft, World War I aircraft made, and in dogfight sequences, you could have had up to 20 different aircraft flying at the same time, which is an extraordinary operation to actually control. And these would have been a formation of German World War I biplanes. And I suppose the climax of the movie would have been an air display flown by this Maureen Saunders Parasol aircraft. But it's a great movie. I would strongly recommend it, and would be one of my personal favourites. Now, another production was Darling Lily, that had Rock Hudson and Julie Andrews, and the Air Corps, again with those similar type aircraft, used their pilots in the production of this production. And here's a group of the replica aircraft in one of the hangars. This would have been, I think, about 1969. Now, the next film that would have been made was Zeppelin, and this would have been made in 1970, and starred Susanna Elke Summers and Michael York, and as you can imagine, it involved a Zeppelin aircraft, which I think they made a 40-foot model of a Zeppelin, which is quite an exciting movie. Now, I suppose this is where the tragedy of this comes into play, where, as you can see, on the Tuesday, 18th of August, 1970, the man who actually survived the de Havilland Dove crash was killed flying a single-seat replica SC-5A aircraft, and the helicopter which was doing some filming, the two of them actually collided very tragically. Now, that was on Tuesday, the 18th of August. Now, while that filming was going on, there was another film being made, and this was called Richthofen and Brown, the Red Baron, which was the famous dogfight between Baron von Richthofen and Roy Brown, allegedly the man who shot him down. Now, the tragedy of this is that a pilot was killed during filming of this as well. Now, the pilot of this aircraft, his name was Charles Boddington, and he was killed literally after this photograph was taken, when he crashed, hit the ground and was killed. So to have two tragedies, one after the other, unfortunately, had a decision was made then to stop cooperation with the big film production companies, and no longer the use of Defence Force personnel in major productions. And yet again, the Air Corps pilots were used in this film as well. And interestingly, one of the pilots who flew in this was a gentleman who played rugby for Ireland called Mick Hipwell. He was number 8, if my memory serves me right. And there's a group of them all standing around beside the replica aircraft after a hard day's filming. And interesting, I forgot to mention there, the film production of Darling Lily cost $70,000 per day for the flying sequences. extraordinary amount of money for then. Now, the pilot who was a coordinator of these 4 major productions was a retired Royal Canadian Air Force pilot called Lynn Garrison, and the gentleman is still a sprightly 87 years old, but he survived this crash along with the actor Don Stroud. I don't know if you remember him. He was in a movie with Clint Eastwood, I think one of the Dirty Harry movies, where he played the bad guy. But now I suppose the other aspect of this is that one of the Irish Air Corps Spitfires was sold to a gentleman called Nick Grace, who's the gentleman sitting on the wing here, and he bought it, would have been about 1985. 1983. It took him 5 years to put it back together, and unfortunately, the poor man was killed in a car crash in 1988, October 1988. Now, this is a picture of his wife, Caroline Grace, who was left a widow with 2 young children, and she took to flying the Spitfire in his honour, and herself was unfortunately killed in a car crash on December the 12th, 2022. So the aircraft is still flying, but I just thought with the 2 tragedies combined and my liking to join the dots and link things up, I've just felt compelled to make this short video as a little tribute to them. And also, today is a kind of a special day for me as well, where I actually surrender gravity and time from one year to the next, if you know what I mean. So I'm a year older than I was yesterday. So I hope you enjoyed this little video, and thanks very much for watching, and I'll appreciate any comments underneath. Good night, good luck, and God bless.